Do you want to just say your name and introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Linda Mak, and I'm the daughter of Luella Mak, who was one of the residents of actually all three sites of Ming Quong.
Okay.
So she was in Los Gatos for a little bit at the time. And I guess I am talking about her experiences, or what I think she had as experiences. So what I wanted to do first was give an overview of her life, and then I'll talk about Ming Quong, her life at Ming Quong, all three areas. Probably most of it. Most of what I'll say is her last Los Gatos experience, and then when she moved back to Oakland. And then I have some thoughts on what my sister and my niece thought about her, what my mother gained from her life at Ming Quong. So
Okay.
I'll end with that, I guess.
Okay. Do you want to start with just when was your mother born?
Okay, my mother was born on April 10th, 1927, and she was born in Oakland. Her father was an immigrant from China. His father had come from China earlier and was kind of the scribe that wrote letters home to people in the village for the Wong Association. And eventually he had three sons, but he had a son, came to the United States, saved his money for 7 years, went back to China for a little bit, had my grandfather, or his wife had my grandfather, and then came back, and then saved his money again, and then went back to China a third time. And and he had a third son, and I'm not exactly sure whether he stayed or what happened after that. But my grandfather came to the United States when he was a boy, or a young man. I'm not quite sure when. Left his mother and his little brother and never saw his mother again. He never went back to China. And in the middle of that, his younger brother was old enough got to be old enough to travel. He'd come over in my grandfather's name. So he'd be traveling back and forth, and then he would go home and see his mother. So eventually he came to the United States to live and stayed. And so my grandfather had an arranged marriage to my grandmother. Excuse me. Yeah, it was my grandmother. I never knew her, so. Who was Lily Chan Wong. And she was actually born in the San Joaquin Valley. And I believe that her mother also was. So that family was in the United States for quite a long time. And unfortunately, nobody who's still living knows what my great-grandmother's name was. So we're kind of stuck. They lost all of the birth records in a big fire in, I think it was Walnut Grove, in the early 1900s. And so all of the records are gone. And when my mother was inquiring, trying to find out who her grandmother was as an adult, they said, well, her relatives would say, well, we called her Yima, which is second mother, and my mother called her Papa, so nobody knows. And then she kind of disappeared. So anyway, my mother was their third child of Wong, young Kim Wong and Wei Chan Wong. She had two older brothers that were born in Yuma, Arizona, because I suspect that my grandmother might have had tuberculosis this whole time, and they went to Arizona to kind of help her lungs. And then they came back to California. So my mother's oldest brother is about 5 years older than she was, and the second brother, his name was Albert. The second brother is Dewey, and he was about 3 years older. And then after my mother was born, there was another daughter, Mary Bell, and she was a year younger than my mother. Or she's still alive, actually.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of their family. And then in 1930, my grandmother died of tuberculosis. And that left my grandfather with these 3 young kids. I think my oldest uncle was 8, and then my second uncle was 5. And then my mother was 2, almost 3, and her little sister was 1. So my grandfather was faced with what he was going to do with these kids. And one possibility was to send them back to China to live with his family in the village. And my great-grandmother wanted to take care of them in Stockton, so that would have been their grandmother. And the other was, they had these homes available. Actually, my mother was too young at the time, but the 2 boys were old enough to go to Jungmei. So my grandfather bought tickets on the ocean liner to take them back to China, and then he changed his mind, and he sent the 2 boys to Jungmei, and the 2 girls went to live with their maternal grandmother in Stockton. And during that time, my mother was living with her grandmother. She ended up with a really bad case of pneumonia, and was getting sicker and sicker. And finally, they took her to a Western medicine doctor, and she got well. And after that, she was pretty. She believed in Western medicine more than Oriental medicine. So that was always kind of a interesting thing. We were pretty much, we went to the Western medicine doctors, and very rarely to the herbalist. So after she recovered, I think she was about 5 then, and my grandfather decided that the 2 girls probably would be better off living where they could get access to better health care. So he decided to send them to Ming Quong. And the first Ming Quong that they went to, my mother was 5, my aunt was 4, and my aunt was a little bit too young to go. And they went, so he took them to the site at Mills College, which was a Julia Morgan designed building, and it was just I think across the street from Mills College. And so he brought them there and begged to have my aunt accepted also. And the administrator said, yeah, we don't want any more separation in this family, so we'll take her too. So he had both of his daughters at the Mills College, Ming Quong. And they lived there for a bit. My mother started school in Oakland, went to John Swett Elementary School. And about in 3rd grade, she ended up with a bad case of pneumonia again. So she recovered from that, and the teachers at the Mills College site thought that she might be better off in the Los Gatos climate, and so they had her transferred to Los Gatos. And so she moved into the Sunshine Cottage, which was what they called it then. But her sister was still in Oakland at the time. And my mother was a little bit older than most of the residents of the Sunshine Cottage. I think they were kind of younger kids, younger girls. So she ended up going to 4th, 5th, and 6th grade at Los Gatos Elementary. And she used to talk about going back and forth to school and all the dogs barking at her. And she was really afraid of dogs, and she remained afraid of dogs until she died. So I don't know whether that was because she was the only one going to school at that time, or she was, kind of left kind of alone. I don't know. But anyway, so she spent those years in Los Gatos, and meanwhile the boys, I think, were still at Jumay, and then they left. So it sounded like different relatives would take them in, and then they'd move to another relative. I got that from my cousin. So anyway, but my mother was really proud of her brothers. I mean, the whole time. She used to daydream a lot about getting a house and taking care of my grandfather and her brothers and her sister, and working and keeping house and stuff. So she was really proud. I sent you a picture of them at the christening of the Sun Yat-sen, which was a cargo ship, I think. And they were both went to Rocky Point in the Merchant Marine School. So one of them didn't graduate. He got married, but the other one did and was an officer in the Merchant Marines. So she was really proud of them. And then they remained pretty close. They were still, very close into their old ages until they died. My aunt is still, as I said, is still alive, but the other three, including my mother, have died. So my mother then went to the Oakland Ming Quong and went to Lincoln School in Oakland. It was they had moved from the Mills site to Chinatown, and that site now is covered by BART stuff. BART bought that building in the site, and but it was close to the Chinese Presbyterian Church, and also kind of close to Oakland High and Oakland Tech. So my mother went to Oakland High School, and in 1945, in January, she had skipped half a grade somewhere along the line. She graduated, and she was all set to go to USC, except my sister and I used to discuss it. Well, maybe she should have gone to Los Angeles because we think she would have been a good actress. But anyway, she met my father, who was a friend of my oldest uncle, and that kind of derailed her college plans. Because in December of that year, they got married. And part of what she did to earn money, because at the age of 16, Ming Quong encouraged the girls to get jobs as nannies or housekeepers for room and board with some of the richer families in Oakland. So she did that for a bit, but she never liked housekeeping either. So that wasn't a career path for her. She ended up taking the civil service exam and got a job during the summers as a file clerk for the Department of Navy. And so she was doing that on and off, and was kind of doing that when she met my father. So she just kind of continued that for a while. She had a kind of group of jobs, but they got married, and he wasn't really interested in going to college. I think I'm going to go through some of the things that Ming Quong kind of taught the girls, and he was not the kind of man that they would have selected for her or approved of, but they seemed to be okay with him. Well, one thing was he wasn't Christian, and that was kind of a big thing at Ming Quong, and but I guess they ended up being okay with him because between the time that she met him and I think she lost her job and had moved out of her brother's house, she needed a place to stay. They let her come back for a few months until she got married. So her in her input line, they have her down from 1933 to 1943 or something like that, and then back there for a couple months in 1945. And she was kind of unusual. And a couple years later, I was born, and by 1953, my sister was born. So she had 2 daughters. She was working. Okay. She worked for the Navy. She made her way up to a budget analyst and supervisor. She supervised, I think at one point she supervised 100 people, which was quite amazing. And she worked for the Navy for about 36 years and then retired early. She could have retired at 60, or I think if you had 30 years and you were 55, you could retire. So she was 58 and decided to pick up the college idea again. So she went to Laney College in Oakland and got her AA. And then she decided that she wanted to apply to Mills College. And one of the reasons was that she had lived on campus there at Ming Quong, which was now turned into a graduate student dorm. And also, when my father was young, his father was like the head cook for the dorms at Mills College. So my dad had spent some of his boyhood years helping his father in the kitchen there. So that was another thing that she thought was pretty neat. And that was during the Depression, so I guess my grandfather was lucky he had a job, but money was tight, so anyway. So she finished her degree at Mills. Let's see, I'm going to have to go on to my other notes here. Sorry. Okay, she got her degree from Mills College in 1986. And also, it was kind of interesting because she took a lot of courses that she normally wouldn't have, things like ceramics, and she learned a lot about computers, but just enough to get her papers done. I mean, nothing really terribly exciting, but she really enjoyed being in college then, and it was a good experience for her. Although my husband said she was sort of finding herself, and if you haven't found yourself by the time you're 21, you probably should stay lost. So, he said she was pretty reasonable until she went to college, so I don't know. But in 1999, my dad passed away from mesothelioma. He actually had been a merchant marine during World War II, and he worked in the shipyards after he was discharged, and probably got into a bunch of asbestos. So he had been kind of her rock and structure, and now that was gone, and it was really hard for her. She tried to create some of her own structure, and she ended up, oh, wait, let's see, I forgot about her master's degree, which was before this, but I'll go back to that. She ended up teaching, substitute teaching in the San Leandro School District for a bit, and also teaching crafts at the Marina Senior Citizens Center. So she had always wanted to be a teacher, but when it came time for her to go to college, the girls that had gone through Ming Quong before her and had gone and tried to get teaching jobs discovered that they were discriminated against, and so they convinced her not to go into teaching. So she did get her teaching in, which was nice. But anyway, yeah, so let me go back to her counseling degree. When my niece was ready to go to preschool, my sister wanted her to go to the Cal State Hayward, which is now East Bay, preschool center there. And so she convinced my mother to go to try to get her master's degree, because she had finished up her bachelor's degree by then. So she did. She got into the program, and she ended up getting her master's degree in 1993 from Cal State Hayward. And her thesis was, she did a study on living in Ming Quong, a retrospective look at orphanage experience. And in it, she described her experience, and she got questionnaires filled out from about five other women that she knew that had gone through the same experience. So a lot of what I have to say about Ming Quong is actually from that thesis. So anyway, so she eventually she moved out into a senior living center, and then she kind of really fell apart and started acting like she was sick. We're not quite sure that she really was, because a lot of the time she was really lucid and knew everything that was going on, and then all of a sudden it was like she was putting on a show. So eventually we had to put her in a memory care facility, and that was in Colma, and she died there in 2018. So that was kind of her life, although there was a lot more I didn't cover in there. But let me talk about her Ming Quong experiences, and then some of the things that she had discussed then, and then some of the things that my sister had observed and stuff. So as I said, that she went to, she was at Ming Quong in 1933, and then went to the Los Gatos Ming Quong in 1935 to 1938. And she went to the Los Gatos Elementary School. She was almost the only Chinese girl in the school, and the others were also from Ming Quong, but there weren't very many, because as I said before, they were younger girls. She ended up going into fourth grade there and was a little bit behind. I think the Oakland schools weren't as rigorous, or it could have been because she was sick, during part of third grade. But anyway, she was behind, and it turns out she's had a pretty competitive nature. So she made her way back and got herself to pretty close to the head of the class, if not the head of the class. And So I think somewhere during that period of time, she kind of got herself back, got herself to where when she got to Oakland, she was ahead of whatever class she was in at that time. And one of the things that she talked about was during the summers they slept out. There was a kind of a sleeping porch that was screened in, and they would spend their summer nights sleeping out in the sleeping porch. And that seemed to make a big impression on her. I think she was trying to tell us that we should sleep outside during the summer. I don't know. She would often threaten me when I was young that she would send me to Ming Quong when I was a little sassy or a little belligerent. She said, they'll put some discipline in you. And then all of a sudden she stopped. And I think that was probably when the Presbyterian Church decided that the facility was no longer needed. And then Ming Quong merged with the Eastfield Ming Quong. So that was kind of funny. But I didn't realize that she had stopped. When I was thinking back on it, I went, well, she never ever threatened me with that again. And she used to talk about being punished a lot there, and she would end up in the Mickey Mouse room. So this was after she died. I met some women that had been at the Los Gatos and Oakland room, and I said, well, what about this Mickey Mouse room? And my mother said she spent a lot of time there being punished. And they said, punished? No, that was part of the infirmary. And so I don't know whether I think my mother was in the Mickey Mouse room a lot. I don't know whether she was punished or whether she was just sickly or pretending she was sick and got put, kind of in isolation there. So that could have been her method of getting some attention, because when she got older, after my dad died, she started coming down with kind of interesting maladies. Anything that her brother or sister got, she'd have. So that was when we were thinking that she was acting a lot. So, okay, and then in 1938, she transferred to the new Oakland, the Chinatown Oakland, Ming Quong, and she made a comment that says when she was in Los Gatos, she was the only Asian, so she felt left, kind of an outcast. I don't know whether she really was or not. I mean, she was kind of shy a little bit. And when she was at Lincoln School in Chinatown, she felt like she was an outcast because she was an orphan and lived in the home. So she felt kind of out of the population at both places. But she did very well in school. I think that was when she was in Lincoln School, and I think they skipped her up half a grade. And then she went to Oakland High. I think she was disappointed she didn't go to Oakland Tech, but because that's where half of Chinatown went, to the other school in Oakland. Well, there were a number of them, but there were two that mainly served that area, and it was Oakland High and Oakland Tech. And she did very well. She said she got straight A's in ninth grade, and one of her teachers recommended that she go into the college prep program. And so she was doing that, and that was when she had the talk with the other past members that had lived in Ming Quong and said, you're going to have a hard time getting a job. So she said that she went back to her counselor and said, I think I ought to go into the business program. And she said there was no further discussion. The counselor said yes, put her in the business program, which I thought was kind of interesting. And she mentioned it, so I think she may have thought that was too, that they didn't try to talk her out of it or anything like that. And then around the age of 16, I talked about how Ming Quong encouraged the girls to look for jobs so that they could leave Ming Quong. And so she got a job as a nanny and / housekeeper, light duties, I think, for room and board. And I believe it was in Piedmont. And she used to mention seeing the famous violinist Yehudi Menuhin walk down the street to the bus stop with his violin. So that was kind of a key thing in her life, I think. She was watching a little boy who was about 8. And so at that point she left Ming Quong, and when that nanny job ended, she moved in with her brother and sister-in-law. And then I mentioned that she went back to Ming Quong briefly. And then in the 11th grade, she took and passed the civil service exam, and was a clerk for the Department of the Navy. And she ended up at one point, right before she got married, the summer before she got married, when she met my father, she had a job as a file clerk with the Navy, and I think she was daydreaming a lot. And her boss said, I'm going to have to let you go. You're not getting your work done. And she says, but I don't want to ruin your career. So I'm going to put down the reason for your leaving is insufficient work. And the next person can figure out whether it was because you weren't working or whether I didn't have enough work to give you. And my mother took that as a sign. She never, ever in the rest of her work career did insufficient work. I mean, she was always on top of everything and doing more than she had to do. So that was a big lesson. And she told us that one too. So my sister and I never did that either. Well, maybe not never, but I mean, it was always kind of part of our character not to skimp on work. And okay, and you had asked about some of the outside things that she had done, and and I sent some pictures of her in Ming Quong. There weren't many, but I think there's one with her sister. And
I found your aunt school picture. I don't know if you've sorry.
No, please. You're good.
Hold on, let me come over there.
Oh, okay. Jumping up and down.
It says Mary Bell Wong. Is that her?
That would be
I think that's her right there, number 9.
Could be.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah. Because
Okay.
on our website here.
Okay.
But I couldn't find your mom.
She was older,
Okay.
so it could have been whoever was in that class sent it to you.
Yeah.
So she was very active in the Chinese Presbyterian Church, and they went to church at the Oakland Ming Quong every Sunday. That was kind of part of their thing. And so she served as a deacon and an elder at that church, which was part of the ruling body. And it was interesting that my dad was really adamant that my sister and I go to Sunday school all the time. I mean, every Sunday, Sunday school and church. And which I did until I went off to college. And he always drove us because my mother didn't drive. And he'd sleep in the car. And it turned out, we found out right before he died, he was an atheist.
Oh.
So it was important for him to get us to church, and I was kind of, it's good to have some religious background. So I was glad that he did do that.
I have a
And-
question, actually. They didn't have a Chinese congregation here, though, in Los Gatos.
I don't think so,
So
and I'm
they
not,
would go to the Presbyterian church.
I
but-
guess, yeah, she never talked about that, and I think she probably wasn't very aware because she was younger
That's true.
when she was here, so it was probably Sunday school, but
Mhm.
I'm sure that they did something,
Mhm.
because they were very, it was a
Religious.
religious organization. So I wanted to share, she had written up a kind of a daily schedule. I think it may have been for the Oakland, the older Oakland girls. But this is from her thesis. So they would wake up at 6:30, get out of bed, air their bedding, wash their face, brush their teeth, dress, and comb their hair. Then breakfast call was at 7. They'd eat breakfast with manners, and they had half an hour to do that, and then they had to be excused from the table when they finished. This is the weekday schedule. Everyone ate the same menu and sat in round tables of 8 persons, more or less, with the teacher serving and eating with each of the tables, probably making sure that the girls weren't playing around. After breakfast, they'd fix their own beds, do their assigned chores, and then they had to request an inspection to make sure that they did their chores. And then they'd get ready for school, which was public school. And the chores were assigned in rotation and determined by the age of the child. So they wouldn't have, some little 5-year-old washing dishes or something like that, but they got some chairs to dust when they were young. And it turns out they were like choir chairs. We ended up with one of them in our house. So it must have brought back good memories for her. I don't know. I had to keep it. I still have it in my house. And they'd change each month. The chores would change each month, and they'd be posted on the bulletin board so that everybody knew what they were supposed to do. Then they had lunch call at 12, and they'd eat lunch, wash and dry, and put the dishes away. I'm not sure whether they got to go home for lunch, because she also mentioned bringing a bag lunch to school, so I don't know. And after public school ended, they attended Chinese school at 4 o'clock, and they had dinner call at 6 o'clock, and they'd eat dinner, share and talk about their day's activities. And then after dinner, they completed their kitchen duties if they were assigned them. And then they had an evening prayer meeting at 7. They had homework in study hall, in the study hall after the prayer meeting until 9. And then it was bedtime. And they went to bed, at various times by age. So they'd get ready for bed, lights out, and no talking. And if they didn't behave, there were disciplines for breaking rules. And there'd be things like they got lectured and scoldings from the teachers. They were ordered to sit or be by themselves to think or read. They'd be assigned extra chores. They'd be deprived of special privileges. But she said that they never experienced any yelling, hitting, or spanking by the teachers. And she also had a list of do's and don'ts that they learned. And the first one was, be a good Christian. Love God, study, and follow Christ's teachings. And then it was love everyone as we are all God's children. Be thankful, be grateful. Always listen and obey the teachers. And I'm just sort of reading some of them. Always be on time. Keep self and clothing clean. Cleanliness is next to godliness. Do your homework. Get good grades in school. Don't get angry. Don't be sad. Don't be sad and get depressed. Don't argue or fight. I don't think mental health was a big thing at Ming Quong, so we discovered that after. Let's see. It was like, don't be boy crazy. must have been for the older girls. And don't act inappropriately, that would draw attention to you. That was the last one. So that was kind of the thing she discovered, life at Ming Quong. And then I was going to go through some of the things that I kind of remembered that we were taught, when I was growing up, that were kind of things that I'm pretty sure she got from Ming Quong. Because it turned out, I thought they were kind of normal things, but it turns out they weren't. But anyway, so on Saturdays, instead of totally ignoring, remember my mother worked, so during the week. And so on Saturdays, we divide up, the three of us, my mother, sister, and I would divide up, there were about 12 chores that we had to do every Saturday. And we'd divide them up, so we'd get, they had to be done. And I guess this was the best way she decided she could do it fairly. I think my sister got to pick first, because she was the youngest, and then I got to pick one. And then she'd pick one, and then my sister got her second pick, and then, so it went around, and so we picked them all. And usually, then the next week, I would get to pick first, and so we traded around that way. So, and there were certain things that my sister couldn't do because she was younger. Like, I don't think anybody would want her ironing or something like that at the age of 5. So we get our chores done. We'd get them done as quickly as we could, and then we'd go on with the rest of Saturday, which always had something planned. We'd either go down to downtown Oakland and go shopping, or we always had to take the bus because my mother didn't drive. She didn't actually get her license until she was in her 50s. Although she was trying to learn the whole time, I remembered growing up. And then another thing I remembered was apparently this was special to my family, my sister and me. We got table etiquette lessons, and she picked it up from the home because they wanted the girls to be able to function well in polite society. And so they taught them table manners and how to set a table. So I knew which fork to use if there were multiple forks, and how to set the table with multiple utensils of the same type. And so when I went out to eat at a fancy restaurant, which they sometimes took us out to, we weren't totally lost. And it turns out that my cousin that I had been talking to is the son of one of her brothers, said, yeah, she'd pull us aside, we'd have family dinners and she'd teach us how to have table manners. And I went, oh. So she was actually teaching this on purpose. So that was I benefited from that. That was a good thing to know. And when the Ming Quong girls got together as women, they all seemed to have the same sense of humor. They were a little bit goofy. They would talk about things that they had done wrong. Like one time, somebody invited a bunch of women over, their Ming Quong friends over for dinner with their husbands. They were going to have a Thanksgiving dinner, and when it was time to eat, she opened the oven and the turkey hadn't. She forgot to thaw out the turkey. And so, so they all, thought that was funny. They chuckled about it and, go on their merry way. So I think that was how they must have gotten over adversity and, doing things that they thought maybe were kind of dumb things to do. But they learned from it and just moved on, which was kind of neat. Okay, so I was going to talk a little bit about some of the things that my sister had noticed, unless you have any questions so far.
I have a couple, but you can. However
Okay,
you
go
want.
finish this off. Finish this off. Okay. Okay. So, we for her celebration of life, we had it at the Chabot Science Center and Planetarium, which we thought was kind of a neat thing, just because I liked it anyway, and we thought my mother would because it was an unusual place, and she had kind of stars were a meaningful symbol to her for some reason. So my sister said that my mom loved to help others, and one of her jobs after she retired and got her master's degree in counseling was to do some interning at the juvenile hall in San Leandro. And so one of the things she taught the kids that were there was the acronym STAR, S-T-A-R, and it stood for Stop, Think, Act, and Review, so that they would stop before they did something they shouldn't, and kind of think about what they were doing before being impulsive. And my sister said she was particularly proud when she saw the large marquee of at an alternative school in Hayward. It had the name of one of her former students there, and he was being recognized as the school's top high school graduate, and so she was, pretty proud that she had made a difference in his life. So she said that our mom was a master planner. She had actually put, after my dad, well, maybe before he did, she may have started this little fund before he died, but she had put money away in a mutual fund, and she showed my sister the slip, and she said, "This is for my celebration of life." So depending on how this fund does, it will depend on what kind of celebration of life that you can plan. Well, the fund did pretty well, so we had a really nice celebration, I think. And then my sister said that when she and I grew up in the 40s and 50s, our mother was not Donna Reed, June Cleaver, or Harriet Nelson, which, for those who don't know, were kind of 50s moms on TV. And they were mostly housewives, worked at home, they kind of worked at home. Our mom worked outside the house and had the role of employee manager, wife, mother, and housewife, although our dad also helped out a lot. But she gave us a strong role model of how to do it all that helped both of us get through our own lives. So she had an observation that my dad had made. She says before our dad died, she says our mom was acting kind of goofy, and he told us that our mom had lost her mom early in life, and my sister said she never understood the significance of that until near the end of my mom's life, and she said that she knew that when our dad died, the competent mother that we had known for so long was no longer there. She kind of changed. And the loss of her mother at the age of 3 set her back, and she felt a total lack of structure when my dad died. So, like I said, she tried to create her own structure, but it didn't quite work. And so she said, at the end, she said, my sister said, if there's one life lesson Mom would have wanted to pass to help others, I'm sure it would be this. Quote, if you were offered chocolate ice cream or vanilla ice cream, always choose strawberry. So, which is kind of her philosophy, one of her philosophies of life. And My niece noticed at the end of my mother's master's thesis that she had what she thought were the effects of growing up in the Ming Quong orphanage. And my mother wrote about it, and she said, quote, "Now my attitudes and feeling about death are I was born, I will die. I have no choice for the date of my birth nor the date of my death, but I believe that I have choices for my attitudes and meanings between the two dates. I believe that because I choose to live in love, peace, balance, and harmony, and I am prepared for death. However, as modeled by my mother-in-law, Luella Mak, I hope that I will be able to be alert and express my appreciation and thanksgiving with respect and dignity at the end before I die. I would like people to remember me as a person of L's for her name. Laughter, learner, liberty, lightheartedness, listener, loquaciousness, loudness, loyalty, a lamb as well as a lion with love." Unquote. So when my mother died on July 18th, 2016, she left behind 2 daughters, a son-in-law, 3 grandchildren, and 2 great-grandchildren. So that was kind of my mother's life and some of about her experience at Ming Quong.
Thank you for sharing.
Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, your mother lived like a very interesting
She was.
very interesting life. Your father's name was
Benjamin.
Benjamin Mak. I'm interested. It seems like she was fairly, as a budget analyst. Do you know what years she was working in the Navy at that level?
So she probably in the 70s and 80s, and she moved up. She was It turned out that she. Most budget analysts now need a college education.
Yeah.
So, yeah, she somehow worked her way up. She took courses through the community college when she was working, and that was how she didn't have many units to finish up at Laney to get her AA when she retired, because she had taken courses previous to that. So I guess she must have gotten enough college to satisfy the requirements for the job. But like she was a smart lady.
Yeah.
So.
And to be managing that many people, it seems unique both for women and just a woman of color to have that level of job at that time.
Yeah.
That's impressive. What was her degree from Mills College?
It was a BA in general studies.
Okay.
So she took a lot of different things, and I think it was it was general studies. So she got to do things like take a ceramics class, which I never envisioned her as being arty, but it turns out she has some she had some aptitude for that. And let's see, what else did she take? Sort of the regular history and stuff like that. She did, while she was there, she helped organize a couple of reunions for the Ming Quong women to go back and visit Alderwood Hall. And she and Nona Mak Wyman, who I think you know, were participants in a academic conference that was put on at Mills College, and they talked about their experiences at Ming Quong. But it was all academicians that were speakers, the other speakers. So that was kind of neat.
Do you know what pushed her to want to do? Do you know the subject of her master's, like her title?
Yeah, it was Living in Ming Quong, a retrospective look at orphanage experience.
And do you know what her degree was? The master's in.
It was Master's in Science and Counseling.
Interesting. It's fascinating. She she took all of that knowledge and life experience and then also got her master's specifically studying orphans.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think, it was just something that was part of her life, and she was always interested in psychology and counseling. I think when she had, as part of the coursework, she had to go through therapy. And it was then that she started to realize that there were things in her background that she had kind of not dealt with. And she never got it completely done by the time she died. So it was, I think when my dad died, and she started to fall apart, it was because she hadn't gotten that work finished.
Yeah.
But she was always kind of interested in psychology and counseling and stuff.
I'd be interested to read her thesis.
Oh,
See if
yeah.
It might be online somewhere.
It might be online, and it's it's probably at Cal State Hayward somewhere.
Right.
So it was,
Did she ever talk to you or your sister about Ming Quong, just about her upbringing, besides threatening to send you and say?
She did, yeah. I mean, we knew all about housekeeping. That was a overriding thing in our lives. One of the places that we ended up living, I grew up in Oakland, and in East Oakland, and one of the places that we lived was next door to one of the teachers at Ming Quong. She was, way retired after that, and so I got to know her a little bit because we lived there for a while. And she was just I think she was the teacher that taught Chinese. And she was just the gentlest, nicest soul. And she used to, talk quite kindly about Ming Quong and the things there. I'm not sure whether she was in Los Gatos. She may have been just in the Oakland, the Chinatown, Oakland home. But let's see, what else am I know my mother tried to. We were kind of naughty children sometimes. We would get her so frustrated that she'd, just lose it, and she'd run around. Well, my sister was the one that got a lot of it. She just would lose control and she'd get the hang around. But I think in general she really tried not to use corporal punishment and all. It sounded like, I'm trying to think of what kinds of things you wanted to know about Ming Quong. The girls were girls. They lived pretty structured lives. Although there were some who kind of were able to kind of escape it periodically, as girls will do. And all the girls would be, sitting out on the front porch of, there was kind of a staircase at the Oakland Chinatown, Ming Quong. And there were high school girls. And I guess the guys from Chinatown, the Chinese boys from Chinatown would come by in their cars and start honking their horns and yelling and screaming. And all the girls would go nuts. And the teachers would come out with brooms and, kind of chase the guys away. Those are the kinds of things she told us. So, and the only other things were things like, they were structured to keep them in line, I think. I mean, there were so many girls that they had to make sure that they knew what was going on. So, with the girls and where they were and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, I don't.
Yeah, no, it's interesting to know if she spoke well of Ming Quong or if she.
Yeah, she
Yeah.
did. She did. You know, I think there was a bit of abuse that went on. None of the girls ever really talked about it. I just kind of, things that get mentioned at some of these get-togethers periodically, and I go, But when I heard it, I didn't realize it was abuse until I was older. And I think in her thesis, she mentioned abuse once in the whole thing, unless I didn't read it very carefully. But she did mention that. I don't think any of the other women did at all. So I'm not sure whether they ignored it. It wasn't kind of a thing in those days, and there were women who had some psychological problems, and they probably were terribly happy adults. They were happy as they could be, but they got through life, and they were functioning and were able to contribute to society. So I think that was what they could do.
Right. I have more questions, but if you have any questions.
You go ahead first.
It was her brothers went to Chiang Mai.
Yeah.
Right? Did she talk to them at all while she was in Ming Quong? Was she able to?
I think so. I'm not sure whether they overlapped, because I think the boys, when I was talking to my cousin, his father he talked about him being farmed out to other relatives.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it was during high school. So I'm not sure that he was at Jomei I don't know how long they were there. But, and then the only other cousin is the daughter of the second brother, and she's just so young that she didn't realize what was, she didn't talk to her father about it, that much. So she's learning stuff as we older ones are talking to each other. So, I don't know. I know that he was the one who graduated from the Merchant Marine Academy, and I think he went in because he applied because his older brother did. So, but like I said, my uncle, the older uncle, got married and had to drop out.
Right. And your mother, she graduated high school before she got married, or
Yes,
just before?
barely,
Okay.
Like a year, almost a year.
Okay.
But she graduated early.
Yeah,
right?
she graduated early. She
Right.
graduated in the winter semester, so it was.
So she was
January.
probably 17 or so. or-
Yeah, and then her birthday she was 17. Her birthday's in April, so she would have been 18 at that.
Okay. Yeah.
And then got married in December, so she was 18.
And by that time, she was completely out of Ming Quong, or was she still?
She went back for that little period of time, and then when she got married, she was out.
Okay.
I think she may have been on her way out when she got married. So I don't know exactly what the time, the real timeline was there.
I see. Did you have any more questions, or?
No.
My question is sort of about like when the girls turned 16, you mentioned that they encouraged the girls to get jobs and become a little bit more independent.
Well, I think it was totally independent.
I see. Okay, so they were still in school though.
They were, yeah.
I see.
Yeah. So they would be commuting from wherever they were
I see.
to go to school. And one of her really good friends is my godmother, and so she was working and going to high school. And she also graduated from high school, but she talked about working.
Mm-hmm. So it's really amazing that even though she was only 16 and started working and balancing school and all that too, she still had plans to go to USC at that time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very impressive. Yeah.
I was gonna kind of just ask you about some of the people in the photos that you emailed me.
Okay.
So Young Wong and Lily
That's my
Chan.
grandfather.
That's your grandfather.
And Lily is the grandmother, my
Okay.
grandmother. And that was probably around the time they got married, which I don't know what the date was.
Yeah,
Those
those
are
are
nice pictures.
really nice photos.
Yeah.
And then you have the photo of Albert, Dewey, Luella, and
As
Maribel.
adults.
Yes.
Yeah, that was, I think I put that was taken around
1989.
I
Yeah.
think that was my uncle Dewey's 65th birthday.
Okay. So those are her brothers then.
Her brothers and her sister
And her sister. Okay.
as adults.
Right. And then Albert is on one side of the photo on the Navy ship, or on the Merchant Marine ship.
Yeah, and Dewey's on the
And
other
Dewey's
side.
on the far right. That's also very interesting. Do you know? Oh, it's the. This turned off, but
Okay.
that's okay. We're still recording.
Oh.
That's fine.
That was the christening of that ship,
For Sun
and then they were on that ship.
No, I don't know. They needed, according to my cousin, who's Albert's son, they needed some Chinese faces, so they grabbed these guys.
Oh.
Oh, because
But,
they named the
because-
ship.
And I think one of the women there is Madame Chiang Kai-shek.
Oh. I mean, it's a very official photo.
Yeah, it
But I
was
was also
printed in some paper.
I was surprised there were so many Chinese people
Yeah.
featured in the
Oh,
photo.
yeah, well,
Wow.
I guess they had to, they wanted to make it
Uh-huh.
ethnically correct or something.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. And then there's a photo of Luella at 18.
Approximately, yeah.
Approximately. And then I really like the photo of Ben Mak and Luella
Oh.
in 1945.
Yeah, I'm not sure whether they were married then or it was just before.
Very stylish.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you showed photos of Maribel and Luella both at Ming Quong as girls, and then
They all had that hairstyle.
Yeah.
The bangs
The bowl,
and the bob.
kind of the bowl.
Yeah, the bowl.
yeah, and then the photo with I can't remember the name of the woman who was there,
I think that was Mrs. Chan.
Mrs. Chan.
I'm not sure. I asked Nona.
Yeah,
And she gave me a name and I said, is that Mrs. Chan? And she didn't, because she gave me the Chinese name.
okay.
And it sounded like it could have been Chan, because I think it was Chun something.
Mhm. Yeah.
I just love the photos from Ming Quong because everyone either looks really happy or they look like they're being forced to be in the photo.
Probably both.
And then I also really love the photo of, so this would have been your mother's graduation at Mills
Oh,
College.
wow.
Yes, yeah, with the babies.
Whose daughters you say it's granddaughter Rachel.
Rachel's my sister's daughter,
Okay.
and then Matt and Kate are mine.
Okay.
And I was going to add that she had planned ahead so that all three of the grandchildren, well, you're still recording.
Uh-huh. I'm recording.
All three of the grandchildren went to private schools for college, and none of them came out with debt. Between the grants that they got, the support from, and scholarships, the support that they got from both sets of grandparents and their parents. So she really contributed a lot to both of my kids' education.
Wow. And then the final photo you sent me was your mother in 2016, maybe for St. Patrick's Day.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of her last pictures. So She was a real party girl, apparently, at the home that she lived in there.
I was very interested. It's interesting that they let her come in and back out of the home. Have you kept in touch with any of the other? You said there's family that ended up in Yuma. Have you?
The family in Yuma was, I'm not exactly, I have, her cousin is slightly younger than me, so, and she was born to the third brother, who was traveling back and forth. But she was born in the village, I think, or in Hong Kong, and then finally was able to immigrate when she was 8. And so when she came over, that side of the family went down to Yuma. There was already a grocery store that somebody in the family had purchased and was running, and they ended up running the store until they retired, and then everybody moved to the Bay Area, back to the Bay Area. So I'm not exactly sure how that store got there, but it was there for a long time. And there is a branch of the family in Yuma. I don't know. I know some names, and I met one of them in college. Who turned out, I think my uncle, sometime before he died, said that she had become the mayor of Yuma or something. I'm not sure that's right. I mean, there's a lot of, my dad used to go nuts because there was a lot of, he'd call it storytelling, made up stuff, coloring up the story, that's what he used to say. But I did, there was like a distant cousin that was there, and I think they're still there, but I haven't visited them.
Yeah, it's just interesting to follow the family and see.
Yeah.
Especially since the family had been here so long.
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your great-grandmother was the one that the birth records are not.
Well, they don't have my grandmother's either.
Oh, okay.
And I was there, so my great-grandmother, I think I don't know, she had a group of siblings. One of them has a daughter who's still alive. She's in her 90s, and I went to visit her, and her mother was born in, I think, Walnut Grove. So that makes me think that the whole family was born in the United States.
Wow.
But she has, she was able to, she knows who her father, is her father? Yeah, I think she was able to trace stuff through her father. I don't know how much she was able to trace through her mother, who would have been the relative that my great-grandmother was the sister of.
Right.
So I was trying to kind of backtrack stuff through that, but I was unsuccessful, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Still looking.
Did your mother ever talk about the frustration? I don't know if she ever tried to trace back or.
She did, yeah.
Yeah.
And when she died, I picked it up.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew there was a problem, because she had already talked to this relative, and they said, yeah, we called her Yima.
Yeah.
And then my mother goes, I called her Papa. We don't know what her name was.
Yeah.
And you said she wrote a lot.
She did. They were mainly school papers for college and stuff. So we get there are snippets of things around that we didn't toss out. I'm trying not to toss the writings out, but
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever need help scanning those things too, just let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Another question, you mentioned in passing that you used to live right next door to one of the retired teachers.
Yeah, I did.
So was she Chinese as well?
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So then she was teaching Chinese.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
it was Mrs. Lee who became Mrs. Lin.
Mm-hmm. And would they teach Cantonese?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was way before
Yeah.
the 1965, which is when
Right.
a lot of the mainland China, or not mainland China, people from Taiwan came.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Did you grow up also learning Chinese or?
Well, yes and no. I was, when I was little, I was cared for by my paternal grandmother, Luella Mak, which my mother had referenced. And she didn't speak English. She was an immigrant. So she lived in Chinatown. She started out in San Francisco. She came over on Angel Island and was on Angel Island for longer than she should have been, because they were trying to get a paper son.
Oh,
in,
yeah.
and they caught him, and so they were. I guess he wasn't able to be admitted, but she finally got into San Francisco, and so she was married before she married my father's father. Her first husband died, so she was a widow with 2 little children. I mean, one guy was my uncle. That uncle hadn't been born yet, even, but I had an aunt. And then she married my grandfather and had 2 more sons, my father and his brother. So she stayed in Chinatown, in Chinatowns all of her life, because she didn't speak English.
Yeah.
And so when I was little, I learned to communicate with her, but both my parents spoke English.
Mm-hmm.
So when they came home from work, it kind of got switched to English, I think, a lot. My mother would prefer to speak English because her Chinese wasn't that great. But, I got around okay with little, 3-year-olds speaking Chinese. What can I say? And I knew enough English to be able to take my grandmother downtown and translate for her. So she lived with us until I was 12 and had moved to East Oakland. But the first place I lived was in Chinatown in Oakland. And then we moved to East Oakland, and it was when my sister was born. And when I started school, all bets were off for Chinese. I spoke to my grandmother in Chinese, but nobody else. And so my sister never really learned to speak Chinese. She learned sort of broken English. I think was her first language. And then when my grandmother moved back to Chinatown when I was 12, and we'd visit once a week, and I had to call her every night to say hi. And there wasn't much to say. So by the time I got to college, I was rarely around, so I lost it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And my grandmother was very disappointed because one time she talked to me and I couldn't remember any word. And I was really stumbling around. She goes, "Oh, not good."
So your dad was not an immigrant, though.
No, he was born in the U.S. And it turns out that his dad was born in the United States.
Oh, wow.
So, apparently he was born in Monterey. We didn't figure that out until we were going through my sister and I were going through family papers. And I said, this doesn't make any sense. There are 4 people here. One says in the Chinese name, four Chinese names, or maybe 5. 5 Chinese names. One says Monterey, one says China, and then San Francisco, San Francisco, San Francisco, San Francisco. And I'm going, this looks like Dad's family. So anyway, yeah. So I think he he was also born in the United States, and I haven't figured that part out yet at all. So we'll work on it.
Yeah, takes a lot of research and
Yeah.
time.
Yeah, especially, all of, like, family search, and I think a lot of ancestry DNA, they have, they're kind of Mormon-based.
Yeah.
Well, the Chinese families probably have something because of the associations, but I can't read Chinese, so that's not good for me. And,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, it's hard.
yeah.
This is completely going back to your mom and Ming Quong, but did she ever talk about, or writing about the change from Los Gatos to Oakland, and what she thought about that, or if she adjusted well, or the other girls and how they adjusted?
There were some problems. She got to Oakland, and she thought that the girls that had gotten there the year before her would be her friends, and they kind of rejected her. So she said that she was walking home from school one day or something. This would have been in junior high, and some other older girls saw her crying. She was walking and crying, and they sort of took her under wing. So that was nice of them. And then they graduated, and then, she was, I think, but at that point, Sister Belle came back into the picture, because there was, like a year or a year and a half, that was difference. And I think I mentioned that when she was at Los Gatos, she was kind of, an outcast because she was Chinese, and then when she went back to Oakland and went to school, she was an outcast because she was an orphanage and lived, half orphan, and lived in the home. So,
I guess the one thing I didn't ask was if she had a lot of contact with the family at all, like her parents or anything after she got out of Hong Kong.
yes, she and her siblings were pretty close,
Yeah.
considering. And I think part of it was that my uncle, the oldest brother, was a good friend of my father's. And my father, I don't want to say ran around in a gang, but it was a group of guys that he had met in third grade, because he had come from San Francisco and moved to Oakland when he was in third grade, and met these guys, and they were really good friends, and they were like brothers. So we would always get together, even as adults. They were friends until they died, basically. They'd see each other almost every week. It was pretty amazing. So I grew up with this group of kids that were like siblings, and we called them auntie and uncle. And when my kids came along, I said, okay, this is, you're supposed to be respectful. You don't just call, a really close friend of your parent, just, hey, Tom. You call him Uncle Tom or something like that. And they had a hard time trying to figure out, and so did we, actually, when I was a kid, who was a blood relative and who was, one of these hangers-on friends. But anyway, so my uncle was kind of included in this group, even though I think he was a year younger. And so we used to see him a lot, and my cousins. And my aunt was also included. The only person who wasn't was my second uncle, who, I don't know, he was kind of quiet, and I think he was more involved with his wife's side of the family, so he wasn't interested in more socializing. But so they saw each other quite a bit. And my grandfather lived in Chinatown. And so they used to see him a lot. He would come visit, But he was an alcoholic, so he was kind of, you couldn't depend on, when he would show up. So he'd tell the girls that he'd show up and he wouldn't, and then, or he would be late, or, so they kind of wouldn't count on him. And it was kind of a surprise that he had money set aside for my mother to go to USC. She should have taken him up on it, I guess. But when we were old, when I was young, we used to see him in Chinatown, and we'd go visit. And he would take the boy cousins to Yuma with him periodically. I went once. I think I was quite a bit old. I was like 15, and we went on the bus to visit the family in Yuma. So I got to see that. And my sister never got to go. She missed out. But all the boy cousins went a couple times, at least. So we got to, see him. We'd see him on the streets of Chinatown. We'd say hi.
Did you have any other?
I think I'm okay. Yeah.
Was there anything else that you felt like you really wanted to share, either about yourself or your mom or anything?
No, I think, my mother never really talked, well, I guess, my mother really never talked about the things that she did. I found out a lot about, that she was a budget analyst. She also won one of the Navy's highest civilian awards for supervising all these people. And she never told us about that. It was, so she kept a lot of her accomplishments and achievements kind of under wrap. And then I found out about them going through her stuff. It was, I think it was during the time I was trying to put together something to talk about for her celebration of life. So some of it got out. I mean, it was, publicized, but a lot of it wasn't, and we'll never find out.
Well, yeah, thank you.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
So much for sharing. Yeah, we've learned a lot, and yeah, your mother led a very interesting and fulfilling life.
Yeah, she did. She did. I think it's unfortunate that she wasn't a happy camper all of her life, but anyway, I think my sister says that she thinks our mother picked the time to die, that she was going to die, because my sister had been traveling and had just come back, and like 2 days later, my mother died. And my sister also noticed that it was the full moon. And before my father died, she said, well, I see you in heaven. That's how we found out he was an atheist. Well, I see you in heaven. And he said, no, I'm not going to heaven. So she goes, well, okay, you like to travel. I'd like to believe that you'll be traveling the universe, and I'll see you every full moon.
Oh,
So,
yeah. That's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. I'm sure they're somewhere
Yeah.
together.
With my sister.
Yeah.
I think there's a full moon coming up this weekend.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So my sister would say, periodically she'd look up on a full moon and she'd see 2 double rings. It was kind of,
Yeah.
that's too spooky for me.
That's great. That's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.